Hello! So a couple of days ago somebody messaged me and asked if I might record a video showing some of the basics around how you go about landing the big jets and using some of the instrumentation to help us land. So we're going to do something you don't often see. We're going to fly some circuits in a 737 at Stansted Airport in Microsoft Flight Simulator to see how we go about doing that. So full disclosure, to set the aircraft up, what I did is went into the FMC. So to avoid doing too much work, and you can copy this yourself, go to the menu button. If the aeroplane is cold and dark, hold the menu button on and the FMC will come to life. Go to the PMDG setup menu, then panel state load, and then go next page, and you should be able to, or sorry, if you're on page 1 of 3, go next page and you should be able to select runway, and the aeroplane will get itself ready as if it was going to be on the runway. And just leave it for a minute or two to warm itself up and do whatever it needs to do, and it'll be ready for you. Okay, so all I've done after waiting for that is gone into init refs and filled in the basics like the altitude, the reserves, the zero fuel weights, and so on and so forth. So if you wanted to watch one of my other videos about setting up the 737, you can see that bit in there. So I have filled in those numbers, and the primary reason for doing that is after you do the N1 limit and takeoff, you get the V-speeds. So that will put those numbers that are quite handy on the indicated airspeed ribbon. But beyond that, I've really done nothing. So while we're flying our circuits, we are going to be using heading mode on the autopilot and a little bit of vertical speed just to climb to 5,000 feet. So we're going to be doing quite a low altitude circuit. Okay, so if we have a look on the map, we're using Little Nav Map here, wonderful free utility just to chart our progress around the circuit. We're going to be taking off runway 22. And then we'll fly out and we'll turn right and fly the reciprocal, which I think is 42 degrees, and then we'll turn back in and come back onto 22 again. We'll actually go a bit further than we need to, so we can talk about it. If we go and pull up the information on Stansted Airport, you can see the elevation of the airport is 348 feet. So this is the main takeaway of how you land the big jets. You need to arrive at the airport about 8 or 10 miles out, in line with the runway. So we're talking about this area here, no more than 2,500 feet above the airfield elevation. The reason for that is if you want to use ILS, which I'll show you how it works. If you want to use ILS, you have to arrive here below that beam down to the ground. So if you imagine an invisible line down to the ground that starts out about 8 miles out, you need to fly into it from underneath it, or you fly level and you meet it as it descends to the runway. So to work that out, about this distance out is about 2,500 feet above the airfield elevation. Okay, so we can work out by this being 3,400 or 350 feet, we want about 2,900 feet altitude when we come through here to be at the top of the ILS. Yeah, so we'll see it happen as we go around. Okay, so let's go and get in the air and then we can start talking. So I'm just going to open the engine slightly. We should start rolling, and there we go, we're rolling. So we're just going to roll out to runway 22 at Stansted. And then we'll fly a quick circuit on the autopilot. And we'll tune in the ILS on the way around. So on the first circuit, I guess we'll do a manual approach. So I can wiggle around and show you the instrumentation. And on the second circuit, we'll come back round and I'll show you the autoland. So it's worth pointing out, although I'm using the 737-800 here, the only reason I'm doing that is because it seems to be a very popular one, but all of the 737s work in the same way as each other. Yeah, or certainly the PMDG 737s. So the 600, the 700, the 800 and the 900, they work functionally in the same way as each other. Obviously they behave differently because they are different weights to each other. So we'll just roll out onto the runway. That's toga on the engines. knots. 90, 100. So we're looking for 145 knots to rotate. It's quite heavy. So you rotate with no more than 3 degrees per second. And then we can move the gear up. We can arm the auto throttle. Remember, the auto throttle is looking to get to 220 knots. Just trimming it slightly. So let's go and enable the autopilot at this point. So it's on heading mode, 222 degrees. It's on vertical speed mode at 2,000 feet per minute, which is just matching there. You can see the vertical speed kicking in. It's just coming up to 220 knots, so we can raise the flaps. That is the flaps up indicator there. So they must be up by the time you get to 220, and it's holding 220 now. So you can see the throttle's moving around automatically. So we're going to spin ourselves round now. So we're climbing up towards 5,000. We're at 2.5 at the moment. So we're going to spin ourselves round to 42 degrees. Do this a bit more carefully now. We have to be careful about how quickly we do it, because otherwise the aircraft might try and turn the other way. Okay, so if we go and look on the map, you see the aeroplane is turning about, and then it's going to go back down this way. So this is a good opportunity while it's just flying around, and it will end up going that direction. Let's go and look at the ILS frequency. So it's 110.50 222 degrees. Now I've already tuned in 220, actually I needed 222. So 222 degrees on the course, which isn't needed. We will do it on the heading when we turn back around. But we want this frequency, 110.50. So the nav radios are down here on the pedestal, and you can see we already have 110.50 tuned in, so we don't need to do anything. If we didn't, say we'll put a different number in instead, so I'll just flick this over. So say we had 113.90 there, we key in 11050 into the standby frequency here, and then you click the button here to make that the active frequency. The idea is you have that in both nav radios, because then you can switch on both sides of the autopilot as well, which you can only do with ILS. You can't do it normally. So if I try it now, it will work, look, because we've got an ILS frequency. So we'll just use the 1 for the moment. So we're flying that downwind leg. You can see there's the airfield going past, and because of the wind direction, look, we're actually being pushed this way. So let's go a few degrees to the left just to counter that. So we've got the nav radios tuned in. When we turn around, that will all make more sense of what that actually relates to. We'll just stay at 220 knots. We're not in a massive hurry to get anywhere. So you can see where we just turned away slightly to counter the wind. The wind is coming across us at 13 knots. So it was blowing us closer and closer. So when we made our turn at the other end, we would have been off to the left as we came in, yeah, because we would have blown that way, turned. So we're just countering it to come back in the right kind of place. So we're looking to get to here for about 2,500 feet. So if you remember, airfield's at 350, so we want about 2,900. So let's start descending now. We're at 5,000, so we're setting our target altitude for 2,800 would be even better actually. So 2,800 feet is the target. And we'll come down, we'll use vertical speed to do it. We'll just do it really gently. ,700, 800 or 1,000 feet a minute should be fine. The throttles will wind back, look, to make sure we don't accelerate beyond 220. And you also get an estimation on here, the green banana, which is the point on the track where you are going to reach your target altitude. So if we zoom out, it's difficult to see on this view. So if we go and look at this on, if we press the center button, yeah, you can see the airfield over here now. So we're showing a 20-mile range. So if we were to turn around now, let's have a look at the height. We're still at 4,000 feet. So we would be above the ILS were we to turn around right now. So we'll just hang on. Notice we are speeding up. We're still below 250 knots. So this is the danger of using vertical speed, by the way, look. We're coming down at 1,000 feet a minute. The aeroplane's coasting and accelerating. It can't help it. It's very slick because the gear is up and the flaps are up. So that beep you just heard is that we are within 900 feet of our target altitude. So it makes a klaxon noise, just to let you know that. Okay, let's spin back around, because by the time we turn we'll be at 2,800 feet. So we're going to go back now to 222 degrees. So we're going to whiz the heading bug around. And you'll see the symbology come to life on this display. We can also change this display using the roller here to go to approach mode. And you can see suddenly we've got the glide slope showing up, and we've got the localizer showing up over here. This equates to the localizer as well. So the arrow here is set by the course. Yeah, so you can take that as being the runway direction. We have already set it to 222 degrees, which is the runway direction. So you know this is your little aeroplane. We're going that way. So when we finish turning, we'll be in line with the runway, and we'll know if we're to the left or the right of the runway. So I'm going to come off the autopilot on purpose. You have to press this button here to stop the alarm. So we're going to turn in a little bit more steeply. So at the moment we're in line with the runway, but we haven't finished turning. So now we are in line with the runway. But this line in the middle called the course deviation indicator is off to the right, which means if you look at the diagram of the little aeroplane, we are off to the left of the center line. If we look off in the distance, if we sit up, there's the runway, we're off to the left. Yeah? So we now need to start managing speed. So we're going to come off the auto throttle just so you can see this happen. So we need to get slow enough to drop the flaps. So remember 220 degrees was the limit for flaps, so as soon as we're below 220 we can start dropping flaps. You're looking for about 145 knots approach on a 737. So we're still flying across. Look, we're going to fly across the track of the runway, and you can see this line is coming in. Now look at this marker here. This is the glide slope, so we are too high. So we're going to cut the throttles right back to allow us to drop the nose. If you're not going slow enough, it has spoilers, so I'm dropping the spoilers now as well, which will help us arrest our speed as we descend. So keep an eye on the glide slope here. We're coming down quite rapidly, and we're looking to get below or on that the diamond into the middle of the glide slope meter there. So you can see it's replicated here as well, and there's another one here. So there we go. So let's go and get the gear down. We haven't actually dropped the gear yet. Look, it's in the off position at the moment. So we can go for the next level of flaps, and we can drop the gear
2500,
and go for the next level of flaps. So all you're doing is looking at these two diamonds, and if we can illustrate this, if I go off to one side, I'm going to go full flaps now so it stops complaining at me. If we go off to one side, watch the diamond in the middle. It will start drifting to the left, meaning we are to the right of the center line. So that this is really representing the center line. So it's to the left of where we are. Also notice we're quite high now, so we've gone above the diamond here. So let's go and wind back across. We're diving, look, you can see the nose is quite steeply down. We're coming back down, we've gone off to the left now, but we're coming back onto the glide slope. So what you're trying to do is to get the aeroplane into a state of equilibrium. Yeah, that's the stick shaker you can hear. So we just open the throttle to stop that happening. So stick shaker's there on purpose. It means if you get too slow, that's what happens. I did that on purpose so you got to hear it. So remember what I said, we're looking for about 140 knots. And we're getting back towards where we should be, look. So the two diamonds over here are somewhere near the middle, so you're just steering the aeroplane. So even if you can't see the runway, you can still use these diamonds to help you in.
1000.
So you're looking for about 140 knots, remember, or thereabouts. So we're off slightly to the left, which we could see on the CDI there. We're slightly low, but that's not a major concern. We're a little bit slow. So remember, we're not going to do a full stop.
Traffic.
We're going to take off again. There's probably an AI aircraft is near us. So we're slightly off to one side. When you get closer to the runway, you should be able to see the PAPI lights. So we've got two reds and two whites down there, which means we're in the right place. If you're too high, you'll have lots of white lights. If you're too low, you'll have lots of red lights.
300.
So we're more or less on track.
200.
So I'm actually sitting up in the cockpit, so normally you would be here, which would make a bit more sense. See, we're a bit low, and all the PAPIs have gone red, look. They're suddenly going to go white, look, as we drift through.
30. 20. 10.
There we go. So right, we're going to stop the alarms because it's expecting us to do. I'm just raising the flaps, we're going to go too fast for them. So we're doing things completely as you normally wouldn't. So Gear can come back up, 170 knots. Let's go and set this back for 5,000 feet. Let's go and put it on vertical speed mode and put the autopilot back on. So we're on vertical speed, heading mode. We could engage the auto throttle and let it take over control of power again. So you'll see the throttle's kicking back in. So the next one, rather than letting the airplane, or rather than us controlling it, we're going to do everything on fully automatic this time. So let's go and turn around straight away. And we'll let it do it. We'll keep the turn rate the same. Notice on the heading on the autopilot you can set it to the bank angle as well. So we want to get this to go to 42 degrees to go the reciprocal of the direction we were going. Climbing out to 5,000 feet. So you can see we're done a bit of a sharper turn this time, or we turned earlier. Notice once the gear is up you can put the landing gear back to off in the 737. By having it either end of the scale means it's pressurizing the hydraulics for the undercarriage and it causes unnecessary wear and tear. So we can leave all the course and everything exactly as it was. All that relates to is the HSI, the horizontal situation indicator. So this arrow and then the CDI in the middle of it. So remember, we've still got the nav radios tuned into the ILS, but at the moment we're not using the modes to take that into account. We're just using heading mode, and we were on vertical speed. Look, it's just approaching 5,000 feet as we level out at the top of the turn. So we're now going downwind again. Now remember, last time we needed a few degrees to play with, so we're going to go for 38 degrees to counter this crosswind. So what we're going to do is fly back out the same direction again, but this time we're going to use approach mode. We're going to leave the autopilot on when we come out of the turn, and we're going to switch to approach mode. Now the key to this is we can't enable approach mode if we are above the glide slope. We have to be below the glide slope at the point we enable approach mode. So on approach we are still in control of the flaps and the target airspeed. If you have got a fully programmed flight plan, then you can use VNAV, which is the button here, and that means the aeroplane will take control of both the speed and the altitude. So you'll set your target altitude to the airfield elevation and let it bring you in. Obviously once you get within ILS range you'll switch from VNAV over to approach mode. But today I'm just going to show you the very basics of getting in the right place in the sky. So we need to be, remember, 29 or 2,800 feet coming in here because the airfield's at 350. So we want to be 2,500 feet above the airfield elevation at the point we get to the end of the feathers, which typically is 2,500 feet above airfield elevation. On this is worth pointing out, on a 3-degree glide slope. Not all glide slopes are 3 degrees. Typically they are, but if it's in a mountainous area you sometimes get, or a city, you sometimes get steeper glide slopes. In which case you'll have to do the maths. But then approach charts will show you, the altitude to come into the glide slope at. Okay, so we're going to fly out. Let's start dropping down to 2,800 feet again then. And instead of using vertical speed mode this time, we're going to use level change mode. So what level change will do is, based on the speed we're doing and the configuration of the aircraft, it will use the best descent rate it can. So you can see it's winding the throttles back to maintain 220 knots. We'll even go one further than that. We'll tell it immediately to go for 180 knots. So you can see the speed is coming off. Now it will favour decelerating over dropping. So it's not descending as fast as it might. The only reason we're getting warnings is because we have no flight plan and the aeroplane doesn't know what to do. So it's favouring, it's keeping the nose up to an extent in order to decelerate. And again, remember, we can use the spoilers to expedite that. Okay, so let's turn, where are we on the map? Let's turn back around, we should be good. So heading goes back to 222 degrees again. But this time we're going to be using the glide slope. Now we're on just under the glide slope at the moment, so let's throw the spoilers out as we make the turn, which will allow us to descend more steeply. So I'm just setting our heading to 220, or 222, sorry. So there we go. Runway direction is 222 degrees. Heading is 222 degrees. Or it will be. We're just making the turn now. Yeah, so it's coming in quite early, look. And we're well below the glide slope now, because we're coming down more steeply. Turning around towards the airfield. So if you look on the map here, you can see the heading bug. We know we're turning tightly, so we're going to put ourselves on an intercept course instead. So we'll fly 20 degrees across the runway direction to come across here, yeah? Now at this point, you can see we've got 2 diamonds on the display. We're going to press approach. So the aeroplane now, when it intercepts those diamonds, will fly along them on purpose. So we're at 180 knots. We can start putting the flaps out. We can put the gear down. We can start managing the speed to slow down even further. Notice the aeroplane, look, it's turning itself now. It's still flying at 2,800 feet or thereabouts, and it will continue to do that until it intercepts the glide slope. So it's flying straight and level underneath the glide slope. So if you imagine, actually there's so much mist now, look, you can't see the runway, so this is a really good demonstration. At the moment we're flying along, the airfield's out there. It can't do the speed we've asked for unless we give it more flaps. So I'm going to give it more flaps, and that A will go away and it will go and try and get to 160 knots for us. There we go, look, the flaps have now extended and it's happy to go to 160 knots. If we go full flaps, we can then go for 140 knots. So we're covering an awful lot of little bits of subject here, mostly around 737 operations, but we'll come off the speed brakes now, we don't need them anymore. So you can see the aeroplane is descending now all on its own. It's following the glide slope down, and that's because approach mode was on. It should still be on. It's interesting that it's not lit up anymore. So notice we can also turn both autopilots on because it's tuned into an ILS frequency. Also the symbology here, you can see it says single channel at the moment. As we get closer that will change, and this will change and say flare, which means it can do autoland. We can also go over here and turn on auto brakes, so I can illustrate what that does when we touch the runway. It does exactly what it says on the tin, to be honest. So you can see the aeroplane's lined itself up laterally in the right place, and vertically it's following that invisible line down to the runway now. So we're just starting to see through the mist, so you'll see the runway out ahead of us very soon. So we can just literally sit here and watch this now. So let's have a look from outside. Take a screenshot. So the plane is flying itself. Aha, there we go, we just missed that happening. Look, it says flare now. Which means if you get flare mode to show up, it means it's going to do the auto land. It's a special mode of the approach mode, or sub mode of the approach mode, I should say. I don't think I've got, yeah, I haven't got a model of the 737 here right now that's got the head-up display, because that has lots of nice information in it as well. But you don't need it. As long as you've got these two instruments, and they're kind of replicating each other in some ways. You know, you've got localizer and glide slope here, you've got localizer here and glide slope. You've got the wind indication, so the plane will be crabbing across the wind automatically to hold the center line, and it's following the glide slope down perfectly. We should see the runway very soon. I've got the TCAS system, the traffic collision avoidance system, on TA mode, so it's not going to react to seeing any traffic.
500.
And there's the runway just coming out of the mist right in front of us. So should we watch this from outside? Get a nice angle with everything in it that we need, or that we'd like to see. Get ready to watch the plane flare all on its own. There it goes. It's cut the throttles, it's flaring. It missed the centre line though, look. But now it's auto braking. So if we go inside, the plane is slowing itself down, look. All on its own. How cool is that? So we could disable the autopilot now, turn the warning off. So the warning we got when we did the touch and go, which is not normal operations, it wasn't expecting the throttles to be opened on the runway beyond a few percent. So that's what the klaxon was that we heard when we did the touch and go. So hopefully that's been useful to you. So the key to all of it with flying the big jets in is to get the ILS radio frequencies tuned in, and to get yourself to 2,500 feet above the airfield elevation at 10 miles out. And then as you fly into the glide slope, you can fly in from underneath it and have approach mode on before you hit the glide slope, because once you are above the glide slope, you can't enable approach mode. Let's go and taxi back along the Alpha taxiway. Look at the stuttering with it loading assets. It's terrible, isn't it? It's all the airliners it's loading in the distance, and once it's finished loading them, it'll be smooth as anything again. They really need to work on that. Okay, so we covered quite a lot of ground there, but hopefully that's been really useful to anybody that's kind of, you know, lost as to what you should be looking at. There is a lot to take in, there's a lot to think about, but I think if you just practice, do some circuits and get the ILS tuned in, get the course tuned in to the direction of the runway, and put your aeroplane in the right place in the sky to pick up the ILS, you'll be good to go. Obviously then it's just managing speed and flaps and gear on the way in. Okay, I'm going to leave it there, and I'll see you again soon. Take care.